So you decided to contemplate moving out of the United States to another country. I'm Brandon. I actually left the United States almost 4 years ago. I left during the pandemic in August 2021 and moved to Sweden. I want to give a keep it real conversation to you guys if you are thinking about moving out of the United States, and cover 10 things you really need to think long and hard about before you make this big decision. I'm an American nurse from Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas who moved here, as said, during the COVID pandemic. And I've got other content out there if you're interested in learning about my journey moving to Sweden, what it's been like for me, why I did that, why I made the move. I want to make a disclaimer as well that I will cover a little bit of conversation about money, finances, and health. This is solely for entertainment purposes. I am not giving financial advice. Make sure and seek a appropriate advisor when making financial decisions. And I'm not giving health advice. I'm merely speaking anecdotally. Consult your physician if you have any questions. That being said, let's get to the video and talk about 10 things you really need to think long and hard about if you are going to leave the United States. Now, my target audience is Americans, but really a lot of this stuff does apply to people wanting to leave other countries. But as I said, the target audience is Americans. In fact, it's very interesting. A lot of the surveys are showing a large amount of Americans are considering this. In fact, this year I've come across several articles showing that between 2 out of 5 or almost 50%, almost half of Americans have at least contemplated the idea of moving out of the United States. Immigration is a very age-old thing. It's been here as long as humans have been here. That's why we have humans living all over the planet. And it will probably be here as long as humans are on this planet. And a lot of things get people to want to move. So, for example, looking for better economic situation, looking for food, scarcity of certain items, weather changes, political climates, and political uncertainty, such as what we're seeing when we watch the news right now in the United States. A lot of people are reaching out to me and are very unhappy with the current political situation, and they are feeling afraid. So a lot of them have decided that they want to consider moving abroad. Now, let's get to those 10 things. First off, you need to know the why. Why do you want to move? And this is very important, because if you're solely moving just because you're bitter, angry, and resentful of whatever's been going on to you in your life in the United States, and you're carrying that negative, toxic baggage with you wherever you go, if that's the only reason, you're going to be in for a big surprise, because wherever you move, you're going to find out that there is no perfect country on this planet. I live in one of the higher rated countries on the globe, and Sweden does rank pretty high. There are some countries that rank higher, but it is up there in the top countries for quality of life and things of that nature. But Sweden has problems just like any other country, and sometimes you're swapping one set of problems for another set of problems. Here we've got issues with increasing gun violence, increasing problems with other types of criminality, gangs, organized crime, corruption. And when you come to this country or any other country and you're only coming with negative baggage and you don't really have a positive reason why you're coming, you're probably either going to be left very sad or depressed or angry, irritated. And it's not an easy thing. You don't just pack a few bags and leave to another country. It's a huge investment to come to another place. So you need to have a big reason why. That way, when you do meet with adversity and come across certain problems, you can always remind yourself the why of why you came to that country that you moved to. Some people, they move for positive reasons. Maybe it's love. They've met somebody in another country that they fall in love with. Maybe it is because of a job change. Maybe their company has asked them to move. Those are some of the easier ways to move to another country, but even those come with challenges. Then there's those of us that come with other baggage, such as, if we're coming from, maybe we had some trauma. Some people leave areas because of maybe civil unrest, like in other countries. In America, we don't really have much of that just yet. We'll see what the future holds. But you have to, like I said, have a good reason of why you're doing this. That way you can remind yourself every time you meet with adversity the why you are doing this. Number 2 is family. Family is important. Now, if you have absolutely no family, which I think that's pretty rare, but there are those, of course. And this video, I'm trying to make it pretty broad and comprehensive, so I'm not going to be able to cover every single type of person's circumstances on this planet because everybody's different, everybody has unique circumstances. And so there, of course, will be people that I miss, and otherwise this video will go on for days. Family is really important, and so you need to figure out how this is going to work. So are you going to leave the United States by yourself like I did? You know, I came here, I had no familial connections, no relationships with anybody. I had some friends and some acquaintances in Sweden, but I didn't really have any familial connections. And that can be good and bad. The positive is that when you're coming to another country by yourself and you're not having a family, you don't have to worry about being responsible for providing for the rest of the family. Like, for example, perhaps you get a job transfer with your company, and your company will help you with the move and everything, but maybe the significant other in your life is not going to be able to work, and so they're going to be stuck at home, and they may go out of their mind, and they may affect the dynamics in your relationship. So that's something to think about. Another thing is your extended family. Things will happen. You know, you've got sickness that can come up unexpectedly. I know in my life, my father passed away unexpectedly at a fairly young age of 69 with no medical diagnosis, died on the job, and I was here in Sweden, and I couldn't just up and leave because of my work and immigration situation and, of course, financial situation. And so you will have things like that that can come up. Those are always possibilities. So you need to have a plan. That's one reason I chose Sweden as opposed to like moving to Australia, because Australia was even more farther away and more expensive and more isolated. At least with Europe, you know, you can find a flight within, 15, 16 hours back to Texas from here. So that was an important reason of me choosing where I was going to move to. Then you have, the holidays. Those are important for some people. They like to celebrate them with their family. And so if that is important to you, then how is that going to work? And if you've got, a family, you've got kids, a significant other, what are you going to do? How are you going to afford being able to make frequent trips? Also, if you're working towards citizenship, you have to look into the laws of the land that you're moving to, because you may not be allowed to leave the country for more than a certain amount of time without affecting your right to apply for a permanent residency or citizenship. So in my case, I can't leave for more than about a month. Otherwise, I will forfeit all that time that I've been here in the country that I'm working towards citizenship in Sweden. You also have to think about communication. How are you going to stay in touch? Thankfully, I've got electronic means of keeping in touch, so I'm able to do video calls with my mother, which has been really important. She's been having a tough time with the passing of my father, and so I'm able to make frequent phone calls throughout the week and check on her. In my family situation, everyone in my family has a lot of anxiety, and they're not really in the situation to be getting on a plane and flying over here, so it kind of falls on me to do that. And my salary in Sweden is a lot lower than it was in America, so it's a lot harder to purchase plane tickets to go back to the States. So I'm limited to being able to go back to the States about once a year. That brings me up to number 3, money. So you need to have a sufficient amount of money put back. I had done a lot of research, and I'm going to say this because a lot of people will reach out in the comments and make statements because these people have never taken the attempt of trying to move to another country, so they don't really know what they're talking about. And they'll say, why didn't you do your research? Well, the reality is when you move to another country, there's a lot of moving parts. And moving to another country is like having a baby or getting married. You can read all the books in the world about having a baby or getting married, and it will never prepare you 100%. In fact, you can get married twice or have another child, and you will still have more surprises. And that's the way it is. You can do all the research in the world. Things are always changing. There's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of moving parts. When I came here, it was during the COVID pandemic, so there was a lot of things that were not certain. And it was very difficult trying to navigate in another language. Even though there's Google Translate, a lot of times Google Translate is not real good for translating certain legal stuff. It's also legal speak, which is really complicated. So it's not an easy thing. And so you can think, okay, I need to have such and such amount of money set back, and it may not be enough. If I were to do things over again, and this is not financial advice, this is what I would have done in my situation, it's very hard to find housing in the bigger cities. And It's best if you're moving to a bigger city in the beginning because you are coming to the system. You need access to government agencies like with immigration and that sort of thing, getting photo IDs, all that kind of stuff. And so it's good if you're in a bigger city, but then there is a scarcity of houses. There's wait lists, and so you may be put in a situation where you have to take whatever you can get. It may not be that good. You may be having to make frequent moves, which that costs money. You may also be in a situation where you have to pay more than you would like to pay, even though there may be cheaper rents, but the wait list for those cheaper rents is a lot longer. If I were to do things over again, I would have saved up enough money to pay outright or at least make a considerable down payment on buying a condo or a small house out in the countryside. Would have been a lot easier for me if I had done something like that. So that's just kind of what would be anecdotally what I would have done, and it's going to vary from person to person. And the amount of money that you need to save up is really going to vary. I had saved up enough money to live off of for about a year and a half, plus a little extra for getting me started on having a new apartment and furnishing it. But I was not able to really come into the role that I work in as a nurse until almost 3 years. It took me 2.75 years to be able to get all my things in order and finally start getting a nursing salary. So it ended up taking longer than I had expected. Number 4 is health. This is very important. And I've got a little bit of experience in this area. So I have had people reaching out to me and saying, I want to move to another country that has universal health care because I have all these chronic health care issues and I'm not able to work. So first off, I want to apologize and say I'm very sorry. I have my own chronic health issues and it is not easy. It's difficult, especially if you're coming from the States. With the way the medical system is set up, it can be very difficult. The medical care, and I know, and it's interesting because I get a lot of negative comments from people in Europe that have never lived in the United States, so have never experienced healthcare. If you have money, you can get very good state-of-the-art healthcare, and the wait times are very short compared to a lot of other countries. But that being said, it's very expensive, and a lot of people procrastinate, put off going to the doctor, and wait until things get really bad because they are afraid of how much it's going to cost. Or maybe they know how much it's going to cost and they just don't have the money for it. And so that is a problem. That being said, I highly recommend that you really think carefully about moving solely for the reason of, this goes back to the why. You need to have a good why of moving to another country. If you're moving only so that you can get free healthcare, there's going to be a few problems. So it depends on the country you're going to. I can speak from experience here in Sweden. If you're coming to Sweden, if you have no familial connections, no significant other, anything like that, it's going to be very difficult to move to the country because you're going to need some sort of way to be able to be here. Either you come on a student visa and then you look for work, or you come here with some sort of job opportunity, or you come here and start a business. So if you're not able to work and you've got all these medical problems, it's going to be almost impossible to come over here. Now, there are those people that you may fall in love with that live in that country and they're willing to take care of you and provide for you. I think those situations are going to be very rare and exceptional. But in that case, well, great. Another thing is the people, the land you're moving to may not take so kindly to the fact that you are coming to that country and you're going to utilize their healthcare system, but then you're not giving anything back into the pot. And that's a problem we're dealing with here in Sweden is a lot of people have come to Sweden and it's creating a strain on the healthcare system because there's not that many people. There's only about 10.5 million people in Sweden that have been here paying into even not all of them are paying into the system. Only a certain percentage of them are paying into it. And then we have a lot of people that have come here on refugee status that are being able to utilize the system. And so that is creating a financial strain on the healthcare system and other systems. Another thing is if you're in the middle of taking care of something health-wise, like for example, I had braces and now I'm in my 6th year. I don't have braces on the bottom teeth anymore. They look fantastic and those were removed about a couple years after coming here. So it took 4 years for that to happen. But I still have braces on the uppers because I have a tooth that was in my maxilla that needed to be pulled down, and it's a very slow process because of my age. Getting an implant, I couldn't afford it. It's very expensive. And the dentist in the United States that started the process, I paid up front, I paid cash to get the discount, and I didn't know that I was going to move to Sweden. I've been researching it. And then the pandemic happened, and then that delayed a lot of my treatments with the braces. And then when I came to Sweden, I thought I could just, it was real hard to get any information on that because I didn't know anybody that worked in that kind of field. And looking online, a lot of stuff's in Swedish, and it wasn't real clear. And there's a shortage of access to people that can take care of braces. But my dentist I had talked to assured me that it shouldn't be a problem. I came over here, and then it was very hard for the first 4 or 5 months to even find anyone to do anything about my braces. So my teeth ended up getting a little bit damaged from the braces, and because I wasn't getting the bands changed and I couldn't find anybody. I finally found somebody, and then I had to pay all over again for a whole new set of braces, and I'm still going through that process. So that's very important. If you've got any medical situations in the United States, try and see if you can get those taken care of and get them stabilized. Now, there are some people that have chronic conditions, like, for example, type 1 diabetes, but they're able to work, they're able to support themselves, and this is something that they're going to have for the rest of their life, but it's well controlled, or maybe type 2 diabetes or some other things like that. And they're going to be able to make that move, especially if they have a job offer lined up. You also need to think about the place that you're going to move to. What are the healthcare facilities like there? Do they have universal health care? Are you able to purchase insurance? All this stuff is really important to know. For example, if you're going to move somewhere, say like Vietnam, I have people, and it may be different recently, but the last time I talked to someone from Vietnam, they said you pretty much had to pay up front for any care that was going to be provided to you in the hospital. Number 5 is work. What are you going to do for work? This is really important. I think the easiest way moving to another country is getting a job offer. That sure makes things a lot easier. For me, I came here specifically to work and also to be able to have some experience of living in another country and prove to myself that this is something I could do and learn another language and all that kind of stuff, the whole package. But I couldn't get a job offer right out the door because I didn't speak fluent Swedish. And in my role, I have to be able to speak the language. So that's going to be really important. How are you going to be able to support yourself? And in a lot of countries, you have to make a minimum amount of income to be able to stay in the country. Sweden is one of those countries. There is a minimum threshold that you have to be making to be able to legally stay in the country. Number 6 is the language. Are you going to move somewhere that has another language? Now, Sweden is known for having a high amount of English speakers. In fact, last time I checked, they had the second highest amount of English as a second language per capita. That being said, I have found that even Swedish people, though they speak pretty good English on basic things, if you have any deep conversations like trying to get your car fixed, or going to the doctor, they do struggle sometimes with communicating in English. I think the younger generation, it's a lot easier for them. A lot of Swedish people do feel a little uncomfortable talking about certain things beyond the weather or little niceties or food or things of that nature. Now, there are a lot of Swedes that have traveled abroad, lived in England, Australia, United States, and they speak amazing English, but you're going to find that there's a huge wide range on the spectrum of their English abilities. And then when it comes to certain things, like if you go to a restaurant, not all restaurants have an English menu. If you're parking, you need to be able to understand a parking sign. Like when you're driving, be able to read those signs. And especially if you're moving to a country that has a whole nother character system or alphabet system than what you're used to with the Roman alphabet, like in English, that is going to be a huge challenge. Are you up for that challenge? What are you going to do? Do you think that you can learn the language? Now, a lot of people, what they do is they get isolated or siloed when they move to another country because they are not willing to learn the language. And I can say from experience, learning Swedish really helps you out. Swedes are known for being a bit private. Technically speaking, of course, there's always variability in that. You're going to meet people that are very open. But generally speaking, Swedish people are private and kind of keep to themselves, and it may be a little bit difficult to make new friends and come into relationships with them. I myself have not really had that much of a problem. I've made lots of friends with Swedish people, and I think learning the language has been a huge factor in that area. What some people end up doing is they move to another country and then they just, hang out with other expats, and it's like, you're not really getting that experience of living in another country. You're just being around more people that speak your language, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but I feel like you're really missing out. Number 7 is a really big deal. I have recently come across this. It is called immigration stress. So immigration stress is a real thing. There's actually a lot of interesting articles out there about it, and it is the stress that comes with moving to a new country, and it's going to be different for different people. Some interesting examples are perhaps you are used to having a certain prestige or level at your company. Like, for example, with myself, I worked at my company for 16 years in the hospital, had a lot of experience, and I had worked really hard to work my way up. Coming to Sweden, I had to start at the bottom. In fact, I couldn't even work as a nurse in the beginning. I had to work basically as a nursing assistant and do a lot of grunt work. And to be, about 40 years old and having to start at the bottom and have people treating you a certain way because you don't speak the language perfectly, and a lot of that baggage that comes with that can create a lot of stress. Maybe you worked in a household where both you and the wife worked, and all of a sudden now only one of you can work because only one of you has um, access to a job legally, and the other one has to stay home. Then that's going to change the dynamics. So those are things that you're going to have to think about. Learning language, culture shock, all this stuff can create immigration stress. Being away from your family, changing of weather, like where I live, we have long dark winters, so that can be a shock to your system. Number 8 is quality of life and creature comfort. So I know what I can say. I have changed my thoughts a bit about America now. I was pretty bitter because I'd had a lot of horrible experiences in America growing up as a child, and I could talk about that in a whole nother video. There was a lot of corruption in the States, and I was a victim of that. I was a victim of gun violence a couple times as well. Working in the healthcare field was a very dangerous job. I was attacked many times by patients physically. And so, coming to Sweden, I had kind of rose-colored glasses thinking about it's going to be so much better here. And visiting Sweden and living in Sweden are two different things. And that's the same thing with any other country. You can visit there and live there, and they're going to be two very different experiences. And so once you're there, you kind of start getting used to how things are, and you may actually start to kind of change your thoughts about where you come from. So in my case, I actually have a more appreciation for America. I didn't appreciate how many things there are. America is a big country with 1/3 billion people. It's one of the largest countries on this planet, and so there's a lot of different nature things there. Where I grew up in Texas, we really didn't have a lot of that. We were pretty isolated there in that area of the Dallas-Fort Worth area from nature. But if you want to, you got things like the Grand Canyon, you got Yosemite, you've got Mount Rushmore there's just so much stuff that you can see and do in the United States. And a lot of Europeans actually do enjoy going to America to see America and see these sites. And many of them have actually seen more stuff than I have. And so that is something now that I appreciate more. Another thing is there are creature comforts, like buying a car is cheaper in the States. If you're really good at what you do and you get a college degree in certain fields, it really varies, but you can increase your income. I made quite a good salary in America as a nurse. In fact, I was able to clear a lot. The problem was if I got like a back injury or something like that and couldn't work, then I'm up the creek without a paddle. As long as I was healthy, I could actually make a lot of money and purchase a house on my salary. And if I worked hard enough, I could make a 6-figure salary. I never made that much, but I could have if I really, tried to do that and sought that. But I was real happy in my previous job, and so that was not something I was looking forward to doing. Access to things, stores are open 24 hours. You got places like Walmart that are open 24 hours, pharmacies that are open 24 hours. You go to the store, you can find anything. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, it's amazing the variety that you have. You can go shopping for a lot cheaper. Clothing is cheaper. There's a lot of things like that are creature comforts that you will maybe not have access to in a place that you end up moving to. Is that something that you're willing to do? Number 9 is your social network. So when you move into a new country, you're going to be starting over with friends. I have a lot of friends and acquaintances from the States. In the beginning, I was able to maintain those relationships, but with time, it became more and more difficult to do that when you think about the time difference and the distance. And so you kind of get to where, when you go back to the States, you catch up with them, it's always fun, and you resume the friendship. But it's not like you can just call them and say, hey, let's go out and have a drink or go out to dinner tonight. So you're going to be starting over. What is your plan for that? And these are very important things to think about, especially if you're moving to a country like where I am that is very homogenous, very introverted, and very private. It may be difficult to come into society and make new friends. People may not be as open. And especially right now, with what's going on in the States, I have had a lot of negativity from people just because I come from America. I've had so many hateful comments to me when I have nothing to do with what's going on in the States. And last but not least, you need a backup plan. What if something happens? So you may do all the research in the world and everything looks good on paper, and then you get there and then something happens. This almost happened to me. I almost got deported. That's a whole nother story I can talk about. Actually, I do have some content on that. And my employer messed up my paperwork, and I was risking being deported within 4 weeks. But I knew that I was a registered nurse, and I could always go back to the States. At that time, I had kept my little house and I had it rented out on Airbnb and was making just enough, just barely, to keep the mortgage and everything going, so I wasn't getting anything profit. But my thought was, if something happens until I come to the system here, then I have that house to go back to. And that is very important to have a backup plan, because if you sell and cash out everything and then all of a sudden it doesn't work for you to be there, now you've got to start all over. If you've sold your house and maybe you don't have an easy way to get a job in your field, that could be a very stressful event for you. I actually have some friends that did that. They retired early, then moved to Spain. Then the COVID pandemic happened after they moved here, like a few months later, and they tried to stick it out, and then they had to move back to the States and start all over, and then they had to give up on their dream. So that's really important. So for me, I can go back, I can get a job as a nurse. It's not a problem. In fact, I got my degree as a nurse practitioner just prior to coming here and got the license after getting here. So if I wanted to, I could go back and do that. That would be my backup plan. But for now, I'm planning on staying here. So that's just 10 things that I want to share. This is a big decision. It's not to be taken lightly, just out of bitterness or anger out of what's going on back home in the States. Please think about these things. There's, of course, a lot of other things, but this video would be way too long if I covered everything. If you have any questions, make sure to put it down in the comment section. Either I or maybe somebody else can answer those questions for you. If you like this, make sure to give this video a like, and that is really helpful for me in the algorithm. Thank you so much for taking your time to watch my video, and I hope you enjoyed the content. You have a wonderful day.